All right, friends, here we go. We are looking today at the end of chapter 5 and the beginning of chapter 6. And what's happening here is that on two occasions, there's a spiritual practice that some people think that Jesus' disciples are not taking seriously enough, and they question Jesus about it. First, it seems like they're not fasting. Now, fasting was just a part of the Jewish tradition. It's something that Jesus did, but Jesus' disciples aren't fasting, and people are like, why are your disciples not fasting? And then the other is the Sabbath, which is often a flashpoint of criticism for Jesus, that people think he's not taking the Sabbath seriously enough. He heals people. Here he allows his disciples to pick some grain, which was against the Sabbath laws, and to eat it. And the question becomes, Jesus, like, what are you doing? We have these laws, like we have these regulations, and they're good. We have to understand that. These things were good gifts that God had given to the Jewish people to teach them how best to live. It's not that you fast because you're trying to earn your way to God or because, God likes us being in having hunger pangs. It's not that. It's that the fasting is a way in which we can connect ourselves with God. It's not that the Sabbath is some kind of just strict religious rule. It is that the act and the rhythm of resting once a week, it is good for us. And the people are understandably confused about why Jesus, who seems to be a man who is following after the way of God, is neglecting these ancient practices. Well, Jesus tells a parable right there in the middle of these two, at the end of chapter 5. He says, look, here's the thing. Okay, let's talk about the connection between the old and the new. He says, if you've got an old piece of cloth and you need to patch it, think about like an old pair of blue jeans. They have a hole in them, and you need to patch it. If you take a new patch and you put it on there, then the first time that you wash it, the new patch will shrink, and the old cloth will not, and it'll make it worse. You got to be careful about how old and new connect. An old wineskin is made out of leather. It's brittle and it's not flexible. You put new wine in it that's still fermenting, as those gases are released, it'll actually split that wineskin open. You take old wine that's not fermenting anymore, it's fine in an old wineskin. Or new wine is fine in a new wineskin because the new soft leather can expand. What does Jesus seem to be saying here? He seems to be saying, look, we need to recognize God is doing something new here. Like I, as the Messiah, as the embodiment of God himself, what he's saying is, I am doing something new. God himself, I am doing something new here. And the ancient forms that we have practiced are not bad. He even says the old wine is good. They're not bad. But we have a problem when we think that they are the point in and of themselves. Is what the Buddha said, and is what Thomas Merton learned from studying the Buddha, that when we point towards the moon, the purpose of the finger is to show people the moon, but we can make our finger the point. The purpose of the fasting and the purpose of the Sabbath is that these are rules that God gives us to help us to fully live, to help us to get our eyes on him. But in the old way, we have a tendency to make these things an ends in and of themselves. And what we begin to see in Jesus is that God is doing something new. That God is moving in a new way. And Jesus is saying, don't expect the old forms to contain what God is doing now. It's the reason that we see the birth of the church. And no longer do you have the sacrifices being practiced in the temple, but you have the Eucharist, you have the communion, the reminder of Christ's sacrifice that we practice not at the temple, that we practice in the church. It's the reason that we maintain the practice of resting once a week, but we don't follow it with the diligence that we once did, because we see it not in an ends in and of itself, but as a means of something that we practice to point us towards something larger. He's saying the old is good, but don't think that the old form of religion is the point. The point now in Jesus, the point is having a relationship with the Father through me, but the power of the Holy Spirit. That is the point. And these ancient practices are good because they are fingers that point towards God. So I wonder what some practices are this week that maybe you need to reevaluate and say, am I doing these just to do these, or am I doing these because I believe they point me towards God? And maybe there's some practices to pick up to say, you know what, journaling might be something that points me towards God. Fasting might be something that points me towards God. So God bless you, friends. Keep it up. I hope this brings a little bit of context and some color to this kind of confusing passage. And we'll see you next week.